Welcome to Rubber Bellissimo at the Movies, where we explore all things cinema. I had the great honor the other night of meeting Charles Burnett, it was a fantastic filmmaker who I truly admire. Of course, he was one of the filmmakers in the LA Rebellion, and he made some wonderful, wonderful movies. And they just did a 4K restoration on his debut feature film, Killer of Sheep, which will be out shortly, the 4K from Criterion, and they screened it where I live in Toronto at the TIFF Bell Light Box the other night. And Charles was there to introduce the film, and he did a post Q&A, which I've recorded and I've included it here for you all to see because I think it's really interesting for a number of reasons, particularly the way in which people interpreted the film, where some of the people saw certain metaphors in the film that were never things that he thought of, but he really liked hearing people's different interpretations. And Cameron Bailey, the artistic director of TIFF, says, hey, yeah, because once you make the film, then it becomes ours. And I think that's true to an extent. It's like the old saying, don't trust the artist, trust the art. Because not everything they intended is necessarily what people see in it, which is what I love so much about art in general. Some interpretations maybe are out there or pretentious, but you want people to be able to wrestle with art and see what they see, so long as it's valid and they're open to seeing it in more than one way. But so that was interesting for him to talk about that. And I had my hand up. I really wanted to get a question in there, and I didn't get picked. Unfortunately, it was packed. It was completely sold out. But after the screening, he was in the lobby with Cameron Bailey, and people were approaching him. And I was about to leave, and I told myself, if you don't approach him and ask for a selfie and ask a couple of questions, then who knows if you'll get this opportunity to meet him again. So I approached him, and he was very, very friendly. He asked my name. He wanted to know my name, and I asked him about how he directed the actors, because a lot of the cast was non-actors, and he said that the two leads, who played the husband and wife, which are Casey Moore and Henry G. Sanders, they had a little bit of experience, but he was sort of trying to figure out how to answer me, and it occurred to me that that is hard to answer, because I imagine he treated everybody in different ways, and so often as someone who's directed myself, it could be hard to answer that, because some things happen organically. You see what actors do, and you play off of what they're doing. So it can be instinctive, and so it can be hard to answer. But one thing he said that I liked was that he goes, a lot of those people, they're playing who they are, So in a way, I took that as maybe that made things a little easier. But during the Q&A, he had talked about the difference with non-actors and professional actors is that, professional actors, when you tell them to do something, they could just do it, right? And so you need to rehearse a bit more with the non-actors and stuff like that. So I thought that was very interesting. And then I asked him about Casey Moore, who I love in this movie. I mean, she is phenomenal in Killer of Sheep, and as well as Blessed Are Little Hearts, which is another movie that Charles wrote and did the cinematography for. He didn't direct it. It was directed by Billy Woodbury, who was part of the LA Rebellion as well. And she's phenomenal in both films. And because she was only in one other film by Julie Dash, Daughters of the Dust, and she was in another short film. And I was just curious, did she pursue a career, or did she only want to work with the LA Rebellion, the members of the LA Rebellion? And he said that it was just bad, not timing is everything, and it was a different time. And I took that as because she was late 70s, because she was black. The opportunities unfortunately were limited for black actors. So which is such a shame and so unfair to see such an incredible actor not have a bigger career. But what I said to him before I asked for a selfie, what I said to him was, "Hey, you know what? She's in 3 amazing movies," and he smiled. So hey, she could say that, and she passed away not too long ago. But I would have loved to have interviewed her, because if you haven't seen Killer of Sheep or Bless Your Little Hearts, you got to watch these movies, and the performances are incredible. But she really stands out to me the most, Casey Moore. So here's the press conference. If people want to hear what they have to say, I also included when he introduced the film, Cameron Bailey introducing him, and then the post Q&A. So here it is. Have a look, and I hope you enjoy.
This film was a revelation when it was completed almost 50 years ago, bringing Black American lives to screen. Like we audiences really in the US had not had many chances to see before. It came out, I'd say, at the tail end of what was known as the Blaxploitation era, which was a very different kind of Black representation on screen. And what Charles and his fellow filmmakers who were at UCLA in the 70s were doing was just a very different kind of filmmaking. This was shot on location with a very modest budget and non-professional actors, but giving the residents of the Watts neighborhood in LA just a different, some more breathing room to be able to show what that community looked like. The film showed here at our festival in 1981, thanks to our legendary late programmer, David Overby, and it's now been rightly recognized as a watershed moment of the LA Rebellion, and really just a great achievement in American independent cinema. Coming into the Lightbox today, I was just playing a playlist of old guy music, and on that playlist was a song by Marvin Gaye called Inner City Blues, and it's just a magnificent piece of music from roughly the same era, a little bit earlier than Killer of Sheep. But it really reminded me, when you listen to that song and you listen to the lyrics of that song and you think of a film like Killer of Sheep, of what Black American artists have been able to do with the oppression that Black communities have faced in US cities in particular, and turn it into the most tender, insightful, beautiful works of art. I think that Charles did that with this film every bit as much as Marvin Gaye did with his music, and I'm so glad that he's here to introduce the film to you today. Please join me in welcoming Charles Burnett.
Thank you very much. I'm really glad that you were able to make it this evening. This film was made for a number of reasons. One is to introduce filmmaking to the Black community, and particularly the young kids. If you can turn on a hi-fi, I don't know. Yeah, it's spam again. Anyway, no, it was to introduce filmmaking to the Black community, particularly the young kids, because if you can turn on a hi-fi, you can certainly work an audio for. And so this idea was to make it look like a documentary, that we captured everything off the cuff and give a sense of reality. I was first interested in making documentary films, and this is a result of that earlier stage of my life. Anyway, so I will be here after the film to answer any questions, and enjoy it. Thank you. Bye.
It's a pleasure to watch this film and to watch this restoration as well. There's so many places we can start, but I noticed in the credits of the people who helped to support the restoration, Barry Jenkins, Steven Soderbergh, others as well. And I guess I want to start by asking you about the lineage of this film, the films and filmmakers who influenced you to make it, and then just, about how you approach the long legacy that it's had with filmmakers like Barry, like Ava DuVernay. Here in Canada, Charles Officer spoke about directly being influenced by your work. Lynn Ramsey in the UK, many filmmakers who've really taken inspiration from Killer of Sheep as well. Can you talk a little bit about how you look at the influences that you had to make it and the influence that this film has now had for the next generation?
Well, it's remarkable in the sense that it was a thesis film. It was only supposed to have been shown like in little theaters around town and things like that, and the Pearl Bowser and Oliver Franklin. And it was in the can for a very long time because it shot on the weekends. And it's not a commercial film. It was my response in going to a neighborhood that I sort of took everything I've seen, and try to make sense out of it, And some of it doesn't make sense, you look at it over and over and over again, and you see all the things you wish you could cut and trim, as most editors do, you see it so many times, you say, oh, this is nothing, but that's the way life is, but unlike other things, you see it so many times, and until there's some scenes where you just close your eyes, and you wish you had been more critical at the moment. But it was, it was non-actors, and I thought then that, you saw the Bicycle Thief and Bresson's movies and things like that, and they had this notion, this reputation of using non-actors. And at the time, you thought that you get a better performance with non-actors, but no one told you how much rehearsal you need. You just can't. I mean, you learn that when you use professional actors, they give you what you want like that. And non-actors, you say, "Oh my God, well, next week we'll get it together." And so it goes the next circle, and then it's a film school. It's a learning experience. I'm not making excuses, but I do. But I learned so much from working with non-actors and with actors later on, because there is a big difference, and you learn to appreciate both in a way, and because each one gives you something different, and you appreciate it. But it's not, but I think what I did was I didn't try to, except for things like Bresson and Victoria's Secret and things like that. Other where I got my inspiration from the people I grew up with. And I took I misunderstood a lot of things they were trying to tell me and things like that. And you grow and you try to make sense out of it later on, and that's what I was trying to do. Like everything in here sort of happened, and to the point where you see that sort of the tragedy behind a lot of things. There's humor, but also there's a lot of tragic things going on, and so it was from that group of people, my neighbors and things.
Yeah. And then when you began to watch films like even like Spike Lee's first film, She's Gotta Have It, shot in black and white, moments of kind of neorealism as well. I'm sure he would have seen Killer of Sheep, or I would imagine he would have by that point when he made that in the mid '80s. And then certainly Barry Jenkins and others who've explicitly said that they were influenced by you and by the film. How do you respond to that?
Well, I'm very pleased that one of the things about film that you take chances on it was that it costs a lot of money to make a film. Even in a low-budget independent film, it costs a lot of money, and there has to be something redeeming about it. And when I was doing this film, I got a grant, and it wasn't much money, but it was more than what most people would get, to. And his friend of mine was having some problems, and he asked me, could he borrow some money? And I just got the grant. I wanted to do a film, and so I had to wait, loan him the money, and because he wanted to leave town. And I was very selfish, and I said, I can't right now. I made an excuse to can't.
I don't call that selfish.
Well, yeah.
You got a grant to make a film.
Yeah, I did, but it's still a lot of money, and the little money, it could have gone a long ways and helped him out a great deal. Because what happened was, I ended up dying, and so that was not very. I wish now that it had changed, because all you want to do is leave town, And so I never forgot about that. And then, but what happened years later, some people saw the film, and they said, your film changed my life. And that's what made it acceptable in a certain way, And so, anyway, so, yeah, I mean, you got to make choices, and sometimes it can be heart-wrenching and things like that. So, filmmaking is like, it's a very expensive process, and so, it's just live with it, unfortunately, but anyway, yeah.
Is it hard for you to watch the film now, because you're talking about things you might have done differently?
Yeah, I was looking at this kid pouring the sugar in the cigarette box. I was just thinking that, when we were kids, I didn't do it in that sense, but the other thing I did. But, I was talking to someone not too long ago how they used to take two pieces of white bread and pour sugar on it and then make a sugar sandwich, whatever it is. I look at that, I just want to throw up. but I did, I wanted to be a boxer when I was a kid.
You did? Okay.
Yeah, because I used to go down to what do you call it, the gas station at the corner. There was like Norman Rockwell kind of image, and there was always myself and kids my age. And the guys that worked in the gas station, would sit around listening to this radio of the fights, the Thursday night fights with Don Dumpy and all this stuff. We had Floyd Patterson, Emma Griffin, and all that sort of thing. And I wanted to be a welterweight boxer. And this guy by the name of Thurman Durden, we grew up together, and we were about the same size. And he took it seriously, and he became a boxer, a very good boxer, by the way, and he was left-handed. And his hands started to go like gloves, like getting bigger, like going like that, And there was a guy named Mel McDade, used to pick on us all the time. And but so Thurman wanted to take boxing, and Thurman Melvin got us cornered one day, and Thurman threw a little some sets on him. That was the end of his bullying us, But I did everything to gain weight, And I think when I saw this kid doing the cereal thing, I used to try to gain weight. I had a malt in the morning, French fries in the afternoon, and mashed potatoes and a malt, and then I had a wheatgrass. And I don't know if you ever had wheatgrass. That stuff you just pick it. If you take so many of it, you take it up, you start shaking because you probably can't take it anymore. It just throw it down. I can't do it anymore. And it got to be like that. And all the weight you try to gain doing this regimen of stupid diet and whatever, you lose your weight back. You're so sick. That all the weight you tried, it just.
You never did box.
No, I'm glad I didn't, because Thurman was a really good boxer. And I'm not better than I would have ever been. And he got punched on. He seriously ill, And anyway, I'm glad I didn't, because I don't think I would have like to get hit in the nose.
We're very glad you did box. You chose film instead. I want to ask you about some of the craft parts of the film. You talked a little bit about working with non-professional actors. You've also shot the film in a very intimate style. And I'm also interested in how you shot the dinner table scenes in particular. I'm kind of fascinated by dinner table scenes. You get so much of the social dynamics in those scenes. So in terms of just your approach to the visuals of the film, camera work, editing, those kinds of things to really show the space and the characters, how were you thinking about that at the time? I wasn't thinking too much of it in a sense. I say it's because it was a simple setup. It was like three people at the most, with the father and then the mother and a girl sometimes, and then sometimes just the father and Charles Burnett. But that was, two things. Someone was commenting on the shots I used, and I'm saying, well, I don't particularly have a plan, but yeah, a lot of shots that look alike. You have this sort of particular style. I said, well, no, what happens is
that what's similar, what makes me draw the same, the images and stuff, like, well, the houses look the same. So like, not, you know, economically, there were the same kind of people that had occupied both houses and had very little, you know. So as a cameraman, you try to get the best shot. And if there's a lot of similarity in the structure,
The camera ends up being placed in the same
somewhat,
position.
yeah. And so I remember there's a lot of things I was sort of unconscious of in many ways. And I shot this thing called The Horse, and we were out in Shandon, and there was this old farm, and this clothesline was hanging, like leaning over like a cross, so like Christ was carrying the cross, whatever. And I didn't realize it was until someone pointed it out to me, and they were talking about all these symbols in the film, and this and that. I'm like, and I didn't want to say, well, I'm sorry, I didn't know anything about that. And so they pointed out to me, and I saw it then, but I didn't think of it as any kind of symbolic thing. And I told Shoney Gabriel, who was a teacher at the UCLA at the time, because he had the class and he showed the film and asked the students to write all the stuff about it. And I ran into him on campus and he started telling me all this stuff. I said, yeah, I didn't want to say I didn't do that.
But it's fine, because once you're done with the movie, it belongs to us. Right?
That's what they tell me. That's what they tell me. And at first I argued against that, you know. I said it's not film, I should know what's in there. And so they had good explanation for it, so I didn't want to disappoint them and say, well, I really didn't know. But it comes to that, you know, and all the symbolism is there. They find things in it, go ahead, you know. And so, yeah, those kinds of things. It's always, you know, kind of strange to...
To hear how other people respond to it and what they see in it as well.
Yeah.
Let me ask you about the music, which seems very intentional, the choices
that was intentional.
of music. And it's such a range as well. And Washington, Rachmaninoff, really a very kind of score and use of songs. Can you talk a little bit about how you made those decisions?
Well, I started off wanting to be a boxer. One time I mentioned that, but I also wanted to be a trumpet player. I used to play a trumpet when I was, and everyone wanted to be Miles Davis or Louis Armstrong, you know, and I was included. And so, and so my mother had all these old blues records, you know, and everyone, and I sort of went out older people, and so I used to go to stick my head in this bar around the corner from my house, you know, and you know, people dancing to blues, listening to blues and things like that.
This is in Mississippi?
Or this is in
LA?
LA, but LA was, everyone was from the South, you know, South Central. And so you really didn't leave the South, you know, just followed where you went. And so there was always this element there. And when they transitioned to rock and roll and things like that, I was right there for that. And that was this sort of thing of, I understood that more than I did the blues in any way. It wasn't until I was going to college I started listening to the blues again, because I was walking home one day and I was humming these songs, you know, and I said, where the heck these things coming from? And so I looked at one of those old records and there they were, you know, and I started playing them over and over and over again and just found that I really, you know, liked them. And,
the final scene of the film, back in the slaughterhouse, with Unforgettable playing, that's not just using music, that's using music to a really significant dramatic effect in terms of just the beauty, the elegance of that song, and what we're watching. Can you talk a little bit about that juxtaposition and why you did that?
Well, it was two songs she sang, and I can't remember. It was Unforgettable and This Bit of Earth. And they both had meaning about Unforgettable and This Bit of Earth particularly. But there was other one that I liked as well. I can't think of the name of the artist now. It's about This Mean Old World. And I used to sing that all the time because it had more meaning to it, because it's all thing about this mean old world. And one of the things that really came about was when Emmett Till was brutally killed. It seemed like the world had stopped for me and most of the kids I grew up with. And we stopped being innocent in a way. And And so that record reminded me of a lot of things like that. And it's in world. Right? But it was a love song about living by yourself, not so much the brutality of racism and that kind of stuff like that. But so I took it, stretched it a little bit further, and so I don't know. What was the question?
The question was about using that song with that sequence of images in the slaughterhouse.
Yeah. Diana Washington. Yeah, it had a ring to it and meaning. This bit of it. So a lot of those records also I wanted to add to it that I wanted to because I listened to the records so often when I was a kid, and that if these 78s are so brittle that you pick them up, they break almost, So I broke a couple of them. So I wanted to preserve them in a way, and so the record, the films, in a certain way, were also an excuse to preserve them. Also, when I would listen to them, I'd get these images, and so I tried to tell the stories from that, as well. And so I applied. When I would sit down and listen to, and think of the story to write about, I would listen to these records, things would come to me and things like that.
I presume that at some point the rights were clear for all of these songs.
No. I say that proudly. Well, at the time, it wasn't that I was trying to rip someone off, these publishers and things like that. You can't do that because they're right there, they're handing out, you owe me this or that. I must say, Jerry Butler just died just recently. He's a wonderful person. I just called him on the phone. I said, I want to play one of your records for another film, with the last show. And he said, sure, go be my guest. He was just that kind, But his publisher said no, And same with Diana Washington, Des Doro, a wonderful person. Des Doro and Amy Doro were the ones who ran a Milestone Films, a distributor, and it was so terrific in getting the rights, spending years trying to get the rights to the music, because they wanted it to be, since it was a part of the film, to keep it that way. And they got, you saw that you mentioned the names of people who would contribute. It was through Dennis Dole that he contacted these people and asked them would they donate to help for reconstitution, restoration.
Mm-hmm.
And so it was him that really helped in getting things done. Otherwise, they would still be in limbo and all sorts of things. Because you're doing a student film, and if you're not going to show it theatrically, they don't care about the rights. As long as you don't make any money, they don't care. So I had, because it wasn't going to be shown theatrically, I didn't worry about getting the rights. But then when you I say this, you never know. So it helps if you have the rights, because then the distributors will come and say, okay, yeah. But otherwise, they know they have to pay a fortune to get the rights to it. So it's better to sort of start negotiate those things when you don't have a name to it, because because you have a name, the producers want more, the rights to it. So if you have a name like, who's a very famous actor? Name like say for example like Roger De Niro or something like that. They know his film's gonna make money, so they know if he's gonna make money, they're gonna make money too. So they're gonna be there with their hands out. And so if you don't have him, or you just don't negotiate before that, you have a better chance of getting a better deal. I don't know if that helps, but anyway.
Well, I'm very glad that whatever business had to be done, we can all see the movie now. It's in the Library of Congress. It's been one of the most important movies for the last 5 decades. I've got a lot more questions, but I want to get to all of you as well. And I think we've got a little bit of time for questions. We do have microphones, so let's go right to the center. I think there's, just pass that along, please.
Again, Charles. It's been like at least maybe 10 years since I first saw this movie, and it just blew me away back then. One scene that really stood out to me was the scene where all the kids are jumping across the rooftops. Can you talk a little bit about what it was like planning that? Also, I want to know, with the recent restorations of this and the Annihilation of Fish, will there also be one for My Brother's Wedding coming up?
I think so. Let me just talk about the kids jumping on those roof, the 3-story roof building. Every time I see that film, I look at directors and I try to tell filmmakers and audiences, if you want to be a director, be a little more careful with your actors. And I mean seriously, because these are kids jumping on the roof, but they do it all the time. They did it all the time, so I didn't tell them to do it. But I didn't tell them not to do it. And that's the problem. We are very insensitive to other people's plight and dangers and stuff like that. As long as we get the shot, and that's awful. And every time I see that shot, I really questioned who I am as a person. Because if they would slip and fell, we'd all be in trouble.
It's a great scene, though. All right, let's get a couple questions in. There's a bunch down here. Let's go right here. Microphone right beside you, and then come in.
Going essentially off of what they said, what I was struck with by this movie is there's this feeling of intimacy and haphazardness, but not in a bad way, of documentary of like what is actually happening. But at the same time, this like formality, the composition, like I feel like almost all of this film you can take a shot and it's a photograph. And I know you said a lot of this came to you. I want to know what the planning process, because the blocking was just superb. All of the way the actors were lined, and I know you mentioned the houses and the composition. I just want to know how many of these scenes, or a little insight into how you planned some of the shots that you wanted.
Yeah, well, actually, even though it was an inexpensive film, I mean, it was still storyboard to be sure that I get exactly what I wanted, and not anything more. And I wanted to look like a documentary. We just shot what we needed, didn't do the typical coverage of, the cutaways and reverse angles and so forth. And so it's just like, it's like a documentary. You get what you want and you move on. We don't try to make it look like a Hollywood film. In fact, I did everything possible to make it look like we just brought the camera, shot, and we had to leave and get going like you would in a documentary to some extent. So it was just, when you go to film school, you learn what's accepted and not, but then you realize when you're doing it for real and professionally that you should choreograph it, block it, and by watching the actors rehearse and get your shots from there, you find it's a lot easier and more it's better in terms of images and things like that. But also find a good location, get a good production supervisor and crafts and professional people.
All right, we're gonna go down here. You had a question?
Yes,
okay. Is there a microphone? Yeah, can you bring that over, please? And then we'll do one or two more quick ones after that.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Burnett. It was very affecting film. My question is, in the last scene, the enthusiasm with which he's whipping the sheep, that was an intentional... The enthusiasm with which he is whipping the sheep into the stall, that was an intentional direction, I imagine? Is that almost a hopeful energy, an enthusiastic, redeeming energy?
No, it was two things. We trying to figure out. I think the sheep may have been rebelling or something like that because they didn't want to go in there. I guess they got used to what these Jewish goats were taking them up to the slaughter post and return. That was the irony of it. That these Jewish goats were trained to take these sheep up to the killing floor, and they themselves turn around and come back and bring another herd up. But I think I'm trying to remember exactly what happened there because Henry was really whipping the sheep, trying to get him into the killing floor. But he was doing so much till I remember his pants tore. And he was trying to hide that as well as keeping the sheep in. And because I didn't tell him to do it to hurry up and get him in there. He was doing it on his own. I think he wanted to change. I don't know. I think he was trying to change his pants or something. His front was always to us, but it was his back. Anyway, I don't know how to answer that question. But you're the first one.
Just in the pants, though.
But you're the first one who noticed that for some reason.
Okay, we're gonna have to go on to couple more. There was someone right here in this, the center. I think there's a microphone coming. Yeah, on its way.
Hello, Charles. It's an honor. My question is, I saw a casting credit in the credits to someone named 300 Pounds. I'm just wondering, who is this person? How did you find them, and how are they now?
He lived in those apartments. In those apartments, and he was a very funny guy, by the way. A name like that, he had to be. But he was a pretty big guy, and I guess everyone had a nickname of some sort, And so I never thought about it anymore since about him.
I think we're going to have to end the questions there, but because we do have to wrap up. Charles, just one last thing. In showing the film recently with audiences, have there been any surprises from what people have seen in it and talked to you about?
Well, except the gentleman right here. about the intensity of the beating the sheep. I never really thought about that. I know we were trying to leave that slaughterhouse because we grew up there, and I know we drove and came back, and drove and came back. So it may have been a timing thing. I don't know, because we had been there a while, on weekends. And the prison who ran the slaughterhouse was a family, and they were very generous because in LA there was several slaughterhouses, and during the time before we started shooting, a lot of the film students were making films about anti-meat, whatever, anti-slaughter, whatever it was. Anyway.
Animal liberation.
Yeah, and so they had made these films telling the slaughterhouse people that they were about something else, and ended up denouncing the slaughterhouse. And so they stopped just as we were getting ready to shoot, and letting filmmakers shoot the slaughterhouses. So I had to go all the way up to Northern California to use their slaughterhouse. And the gentleman who had the slaughterhouse was very great about letting us use it. He said, as long as you don't stop the flow of production, you can use it. And he said he was willing to help anyone who was helping themselves, and so it was really good of him. So we had to sort of keep our promise and not interfere with the movement of the slaughterhouse production.
And after making the film, you did briefly become a vegetarian.
Very briefly. I mean, you try. I just want to see how to try. And I mean, it's really horrific watching animals like get slaughtered. And I mean, sheep is a little easier because they don't do anything, say anything. But cows, they know, and you can see the tension in the cows going to the slaughterhouse. But sheep, they're victims, And one of the things I wanted to do was not make it appear that I was referring to the community, the sheep, as being victim. I know it's a stretch. I mean, it's like not a stretch in terms of trying to. I mean, sheep is already looked as a victim, slaughter, and so it's hard to disassociate that kind of association with them, So.
All right, we are going to have to wrap there, but Charles, thank you so much for coming to Toronto to show your film.
Thank you. Thank you.
I want to thank all of my members on Patreon. If you're interested in becoming a member of my Patreon, head over to the link, patreon.com/RobertBellissimo at the movies for full details. You can also leave a donation, or what I call a tip, by clicking the thanks link, which you will find directly below the video frame. Just click on that and you can leave a donation if you choose to. Of course, I would greatly appreciate that. And lastly, if this is your first time here, please consider subscribing. It is absolutely free to do so. By pressing the Robert Bellissimo at the Movie logo, you will see it floating above my head in the top left corner to your top left. In just a second, just click on that. And then click the bell in order to get a notification every time I release one of my new videos. I would also really appreciate if you leave a comment, share the video, like the video. All of these things create traction onto my YouTube channel and really help share the video far and wide and the channel in general. So thank you so much for doing that, and I will see you all in the next one.